go so slow. I don't even know you at all. Take me back to where it matters. That's all that matters. Play it over and over and over and over again. We're getting closer and closer and closer to the end. Maybe we are just the same. Don't you feel the same? Oh, here we go. We are the souls of the nights we stole. If there's any hope left at all, we go back to where it matters. That's all that matters. Play it over and over and over and over again. We're getting closer and closer and closer to the end. Maybe we are just the same. Don't you feel the same? Maybe we are just the same. Don't you feel the same? Just the same. We are 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 just the same.
Thinking about what's mine, nothing to deny. Who's that other guy? Are you wasting my time? All these crazy fears that ends with bloody tears. Oh baby, we keep prepping long nights. Rock your body whole life. Don't bother the world side. Twerk it like a Vegas stripper, dollar money stage mine. Billions in a cage fight. Fuck their thoughts and get high. And get high. It's all about the mind. We'll be doing fine. Living on the edge sometimes, alright. Fame is how we ride. Life is all about time. Feeling like the world is beyond our sight. It's all about the mind. We'll be doing fine. Alright. It's alright. It's how we ride. Right. Feeling like the world is beyond our sight.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Map Control CS, our first edition hit. I am one of your hosts, Rory, also known as Dream, joined by the ever so lovely Yumi. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's this is gonna be kind of a new one for both of us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of stuff. It's like even when you first talked to me about it, it's like it seemed like a very like it was a great idea for us to try and introduce ourselves to because of kind of there is a lack of a presence in the UK scene, at least in terms of
Yeah, I
general
mean,
content.
I think what the UK scene really lacks is content, especially for that lower levels. And this is a great way for, I think, both of us to talk about our opinions on the UK scene, to get everyone else's opinions on the UK scene, discuss some facts that are going on. But I will just introduce the title of this episode, and that is Epic 25 and the Aftermath. Obviously, we had a really great event just, what was it, 3 weeks ago? Must have been, not too long ago now. what was it, October 14th or something like that.
Yeah, just
Yeah. So not too long ago now, obviously, a bit of a surprise event in terms of some of the teams that did so well. But now we will get into it. Fraser, my lovely producer, if you could just bring up the group stage for us, we'll go through the seedings and some of the teams that attend. Also,
yeah.
want to thank anyone joining here as well.
I mean, coming into Epic 25, we kind of had like expectations, right, of some of the teams, especially you look at like CEX Fierce. Although we kind of pegged for our peakers as like a very like experienced lineup, it wasn't one that we thought like could overthrow the sort of structure that the team should.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of UK teams do lack structure. They lack that sort of IGL presence that can allow them to overcome these mixes. But again, for IP, because they had so much skill in that roster, that it was hard for anyone. Obviously, if you look at Group A now on your screens, you've got Fierce Esports, the number 1 seed for Epic 25. In my mind, that made sense. I think that was an accurate seeding for what happened. You know, you could have argued that someone else could be first, but again, when it comes down to these seedings, especially for an event like Epic, it is so tight to get these top ones done. What is your opinion on number 1 seed Fierce, Yumi?
I think Fierce had the expectation of going into. I mean, even before Epic 25, you look at something like Insomnia. They came 5th to 8th. They lose to end up the Insomnia winners. Endpoint they kind of fall short. And then when they came to Epic 25, you look at the competition comparatively to Insomnia. You had teams like teams with Kiyoshima in them. You have like you have Endpoint that are basically the top 1 UK team as far as consistency goes within EPS. Although they're not doing great in Mountain Dew League at the minute, they're consistently winning UK based events or against UK competition. And then based on the fact that they have like all of they seem to have a lot of support from the org. Like they are very willing to fund a lot of things. I think with Epic 25, I think if they won, there was something about them actually winning the PCs, or basically like the PCs that were brought to LAN for them to compete with would have been theirs to kind of take home with them as well. So there's like a lot riding on it as far as like the expectations go for the team, and they've pulled up good results as far as main has gone and as far as actually placing highly at these tournaments. But it's kind of it's a top seed, but ultimately they kind of still fell short to the experience of Ferrari Peakers that were the, I think, 3rd seed altogether.
Yeah, they were the 3rd seed. CX actually go up to that 2nd seed. They started in Group B as well. Obviously, you have the 1st, 3rd, and 4th and 2nd, sorry, in all different groups. The CX one, 2nd, I think I would have personally had Ferrari Peak 2nd, I think, for that. Not CX, a good team by every means. I think they are in advanced right now. I think it's something like 6. I want to say 6 and 4 currently. A scoreline which is pretty good for advanced. I mean, a lot of these UK teams have known for just being playing main, but now starting to make their, I believe it's Xenex also in advanced. We have Imi's mixed roster of August in advanced as well, and it is obviously Endpoint and MDL. Those are the sort of 4 highest teams that we have. But yeah, I want to just talk about Ferrari Peakers CX. Ferrari Peakers, I think they had a lot more skill in that roster. The likes of Dom and Lazar, obviously Whisk as well, should have been placed higher than CX. Again, though, 3rd and 2nd, it's quite hard to get. It comes down to little points. It comes down to an opinion as well, and the admin's opinion is always going to be different, maybe even to each other. But this is one of the first epics where I think they kind of had the seeding sorted quite a way in advance, or at least had the bracket and stuff sorted in advance, so it was really well organized.
Yeah, and I think one of the admins kind of put out a thing after the fact of like how the seeding did versus the actual placements of the teams, and quite a lot of the seedings were pretty accurate altogether. So I mean, we can't fault the admin team. I think overall, comparatively to say Epic 24, there was a lot less issues as far as the whole event went, and just general tournament bracket and seeding issues. I think a shout out does go out to B Magic to kind of saving the after the group stages segment of that. I think he ended up talking to the admins for like an hour or two to sort that all out and get the tournament actually back in rolling. But yeah, I think by and large everything went according to plan, and I do kind of agree with you with the CEX side of things. I think they shouldn't have been seeded second just because of the fact that they did make roster changes very, very recently
Yeah.
beforehand. And CEX, it's kind of been a recurring thing, at least as far as the past two Epic.Lans has gone, is that a mix with Luzza in them seems to be just the bane of their existence. Luzza's cut them out both times, I think, in the finals of last Epic.Lan, but in the semis of this one.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. CX just made roster changes coming into this, obviously removing Frazier, James BT, then deciding to leave the roster. Murky and ZNX. I think that's the two best pickups they could have really gotten for that. I really, really rate the pickups they went for there. Murky, one of the best offers we have right now. Obviously, a little bit below the likes of Smear, but still capable. He's still young as well. So much more room for him to grow as an AWPer. I mean, I think CX is a good place for him there, as well as ZNX. Obviously, had that experience in Planet Key Dynamics. He's definitely got some sort of international experience to an extent, I suppose, to bring back to CX. He's a good aimer as well, obviously. So I'm looking forward to what CX can do in the future. Epic.25, though, again, I think they should have been third seed, but it's not a big deal, really. Second and third seal. Between that,
you're still top. You're still basically the top.
Exactly, you're still top. I believe, I'm not sure who fourth seed. Sorry, lifts. The lift mix. Obviously, the Frazier recently removed from CEX with the likes of Mr. Hoy as well. They underperformed quite massively in their group. I mean, they were faced in the lower bracket, which is not something we expected, especially if you look at some of the teams that were in their group.
Yeah, and I think there are quite a few teams that kind of exceeded expectations as far as we're concerned. I mean, Medica did pretty well last Epic.Lan as well, but they are kind of it's weird. They're like a structured mix, so they have like a core. I'm not too familiar with them as a whole, but they have like a core, and then they kind of fill players. YD being sort of the kingpin of it all, it seems.
That is a great way to describe YT in that roster, the kingpin of it. But I do want to point out the praise YT was getting at that from the likes of Shiki, obviously a veteran IGL in the scene, for his calling ability and some of the situations that he was in. I don't think we expected Up the Medica to top their group necessarily, certainly to get out into playoffs. But to top their group, I think they actually beat Lifts as well. It was one of the easier groups, in my opinion, anyway. Obviously, you had Peugeot 1.2, seeded 12. I know the players personally in there. They are good individual players, but you expect the likes of Lifts to beat them. And certainly, Medica had a good contention. They didn't even lose one. They drew a map, and I think they drew against Lifts, actually. Rat Pack, obviously, in that group as well. That was the Jack and SEO and Jakey mix as well. They did decently well getting into their third place position.
Yeah, but I think the teams I was sort of like shocked to see was it Dexy had a team with I think Gingers and Ganjas.
Yes.
Where they took maps off, or they took a map off London Lynx in their group. Sorry, not London Lynx, Buzzkill, and they also almost beat Fierce. They were at 16-14, like the full distance within that within the group stages, which is strange to see because you see like Fierce are able to compete against some of the best and even stomp out some of these teams that are taking part in things like the Omen UK League and EPS, and they do play very, very well. And so to have a good result like that, as well as Dexy's mix from last Epic.Lan placing above expectations as well, it's interesting to see a team like that kind of rise up, and as well as a team that I think wasn't seeded getting out of groups with a 4-1 lead, or I think they drew one, lost one, and won 4 was Exilium, which is just like the sort of dark horse of the event. Granted, they didn't get much further after the fact, but they seem to do very, very well.
I mean, certainly well for a team that wasn't seeded. They were to take in the group stage, I believe, a best of one against Baron's Money Crew. Did eventually face them in their lower bracket. Unfortunately, lost out there, but a great placing for them. They should be really happy. Being unseeded and getting out of groups is quite the mountain to climb, really. And just going back to Gingers and Gandra, I want to bring up the point that you said about Buzzkill. That map pretty much cost Buzzkill the upper bracket, I believe. I think it was they needed, what was it, one more round out of that map to get into the upper bracket. So they finished third, and then they were eliminated in the lower bracket by Lifts in the first round, which was unexpected to say the least, really, for a team like Buzzkill.
Yeah, especially because they ended up, I think, after the group stage, playing Lifts in the first round, which were they're both quite close friends with one another, and so regardless of whether you win or lose, it's kind of you're both in the lower bracket. One of you is not going to continue through the tournament. It's already sort of heartbreaking on like a personal level, where you obviously Lifts were kind of like a coalesced mix. Fraser being dropped from CEX, and then kind of trying to revitalize the London Lynx lineup. Granted, they were still mixing in, I think, ESCA main with London Lynx. So
yeah, the London Lynx page in main, I believe.
Oh, I think it is like I think we were discussing kind of off stream is that they're still kind of mixing out the rest of the season, and so it's kind of rough to see that, especially considering they had players like Tarus and Brody who have had their chances on lineups like Mind Sanity, and just they have this like they have the history behind them as players, but the lineups just kind of fall through, and now in classic UK fashion, as opposed to rebuilding with a new team, it's suddenly just anybody's gander. You pick up who you can, and you just play the rest of the season out anyway.
Yeah, it's typical of UK, really, just trying to mix over getting into teams, but it can be very hard mid-season. That is the problem, getting into teams. At one point, quickly, I was just thinking about this right now. The abundance of AWPers in the UK scene really is quite a thing. I would wish one of these AWPers would just become an IGO, because there's so many good ones at sort of the top to mid level. You think Swaggy, Fraser, Murky is an example as well. All these AWPers, and we lack so many IGLs, but I'll give it up. I'll go on for an hour about that. We will just switch to the bracket stage now and just have a quick look at the lower bracket, see what happened there. Obviously, Lifts versus Buzzkill, the big first round there. Not the way we expected it to go. Obviously, once you get into the elimination stage, it is best of threes. So Lifts able to 2-0 Buzzkill. After Buzzkill sort of gave it up in the groups to Gingers and Ganja, lost 16-7 in the best of one on Cash, I think it was. And I think if they had got it to 16-8, they would have had that round difference to allow them to get to the second place, which allowed them upper bracket and obviously gives you an extra lifeline. And then we look at Doink and Rat Pack. Doink win 2-0 in there. Then Iggy, IGI, sorry. Then it's 2-0 there against KDR. And Baron's Money Crew eliminating Omen in the first round as well. We move on to Lifts versus, I believe that is the Peugeot team. They take that 2-1. Then Gumpsters Fanboys, obviously a little bit of an inside joke there in the casting room as you were there, or the media room, I should say. Everyone was giving it about Gumpsters round. Apparently he doesn't like to give up rounds, but I think Gumpsters a very nice person. And then
they basically gave up the rounds because they lost 2-0 in the series, right? It's unfortunate, really.
Yeah, and then we move on to Exilium and IGI. Obviously, Exilium, like we talked about earlier, was that roster that surprised us in getting so far and being a decent team like IGI as well. It was a 2-1 series, but still good from them. Obviously, didn't expect that being unseeded and beating a seeded team. 11th seed for E. Then Austerity versus Baron's Money Crew. A nice 2-0 for Baron's Money Crew. We move on to the lower round. This is where it sort of gets a bit tougher for a lot of these teams now. Lifts versus Gumpsters Fanboys. I believe that was a game that we watched on stream.
I believe so. It's all kind of a haze so long ago. As
too many drinks, I think, from everyone in there that we just can't really remember what actually happened.
Yeah, they lost us. Gumpsters Fanboys ended up losing the best of 3, 2-0. So it's kind of it's a clear result there, but
yeah,
it's kind of weird because Gumpsters Fanboys, they do have it's a well-studded team as well. It's maybe not quite as it doesn't quite have the same level of firepower as the Ferrari Pico's team, but it has the same level of experience almost, or a little maybe a few seasons less, but they definitely have the potential to have placed themselves a lot higher as far as the rest of the tournament went. But yeah, you get to the lower bracket, you face the punishment of not having that kind of second chance life
Yeah.
in the whole thing. But Ferrari Peakers didn't even seem to need that. I think they ended up finishing the event without dropping a map as a whole.
Yes, yeah, that was something that was brought up to us afterwards. Actually, I didn't even realise they didn't drop an entire any map, not in the group stage, not in the entirety of the upper bracket, nor did they lose a map in the grand final. Obviously, we just finished out the rest of the lower bracket. Baron's Money Crew versus Exilium. Baron's Money Crew managed to win that 2-1. CEX versus Lifts. CEX knocking out Lifts, their second seed versus fourth seed. A decent game. I don't think I was actually in the room for that because I was watching the Baron's Money Crew up the Medica one. A lot of shout. I can't repeat some of the words that they were shouting at each other in that LAN hall, but that's what I love about stuff or places like Epic.Lan and Insomnia. The environment is so fun to be around, and the people, they get a little bit too hyped sometimes, but you need that. You need that in a team to keep yourself going, especially when you're losing. It's always good to have that hype man, someone like CGE for the Baron's Money Crew, and obviously YT for the Medica side. But nonetheless, Baron's Money Crew 6th seed versus 8th seed. They take that. CX then going into the next lower round to move up to 3rd place. They take down Baron's Money Crew, finish out 4th. And a perfectly good showing for Baron's Money Crew, in my opinion. Only an open. I think they're 9-1 though. Could be on course for having a main spot by the next season. But definitely, again, a roster that did pretty well. Maybe more so than we expected.
Yeah, and I think as a result of that, I think, in Shiki's got kind of an open mix team. Granted, it is a mix, and I don't think they take it very seriously, but it is nice, or like it is somewhat refreshing to see somebody like Shiki kind of bring in some of these players that haven't really garnered a lot of experience and kind of get a judge of how they are as players. CJ doing well or placing well at Epic.Lan likely influenced him, I think, being now on the Soylent Soldiers, or I don't know what they're going by now.
You got the name right, don't worry. The Shiki Soylent Soldiers, I think it is.
Yeah, so he's now on the roster for that. Brody is somebody that's been on that roster as well, and he's kind of cycling in players. I think I think Canifus as well from UKAL.
PL.
He was a come up from a season ago. He's now in PL. It's kind of revitalizing to see players like that haven't really attended many events before, or haven't garnered as much credibility within the scene, get a chance to play with the likes of Shiki. Granted, as somebody that quite frequently watches Shiki stream and quite enjoys kind of what he provides to the UK scene, I don't sometimes think he has the best approach into building up some of these players experience-wise, because it can just be seen as overtly just blaming them for certain things. But
it can be quite aggressive watching him. But again, you can understand the position he's coming from. He's a very smart person. He knows how to IGO. He knows how to work with team. He's worked with some of the best players in the UK. And he is one of those veterans that I think is willing to play with these sort of talent. I don't want to say lower talents because that sort of degrades people, but obviously these talents that are sort of below the level that he's used to. He can be quite aggressive, but I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing in some cases. Sometimes you do need someone who can just give you a bit of a kick up the arse and tell you, you know what, you're doing this wrong. Let's move on. Let's just go past that. I would like to see him get back onto a team. As of now, I believe he's just a streamer for Endpoint. I'm not quite sure if he's a coach for Endpoint. I think he's just a streamer, though.
I think he had a brief stint where he was kind of coaching and standing in for the team. I don't know.
Yeah.
As I'm similarly ignorant where I don't know exactly what his position is now, but he still streams under them. I think he's still actually
he's in the team
kind
house,
of lives within the Endpoint house.
Yeah.
So he's clearly he's still good friends with everybody on the Endpoint roster. Still hangs out with a lot of them, and you know it's good to see still. But like you said, it would be interesting to see him back onto a team and see whether that could kind of influence or what kind of impact he can bring, kind of moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I was just sort of typing in his chat the other day talking about the likes of Shane, and he really does have a good mind for players like that, and he's always known that a player like Shane has the capabilities to play an FPL, obviously, that he's made that now. But we will digress and we'll move back on into the lower bracket, the lower final, where CX are unfortunately eliminated by the first seed, that is Fierce Esports. But first, second seed. It's not a bad showing from CX. I'm sure they'll be happy with third place as well. They got themselves into the prize pool. So they're able to get something from the event as well, which is what really a team of CX's caliber want. And now, obviously, the upper bracket, some of the teams that we talked about already were knocked down. Ferrari Peak is basically knocking out anyone in their path, not really caring about anyone or anything. They knocked out Exilium and CEX of the upper bracket, Fierce knocking out Peugeot and out the Medica. And then in the upper bracket final, Ferrari Peak has actually won the 2-0 early on. So that could have been an indication for that grand final as well. Obviously, did end up being a 3-0. But now we'll talk about the final a little bit more in depth, the Epic 25 final. I think this is sort of what we expected coming into this event, this type of final, Fierce versus Ferrari Peakers.
Yeah, two of the top seeds coming in. We kind of touched on a point earlier where we didn't really know why, well, maybe not know why, but we didn't fully back the idea of CX being a higher seed than Ferrari Peakers maybe coming into the event. But Fierce, a lot to prove. They got the team together. I think K-Piz was the one that ended up kind of spearheading them towards the Fierce organization as a whole, and it's part of the reason they got the sponsorship. They attended Insomnia, they attended Epic.Lan. You look at the roster of teams at Epic.Lan, it's definitely an event that they should maybe come out ahead in. But there was just so much going on for Ferrari Peakers. Just standout performances from a number of their players. It wasn't just about one singular player or one singular set play that they were able to do. They were just almost getting outgunned on a number of different places, and the inexperience showed for Fierce as well. Obviously, they do have a decent level of experience on those players in terms of playing on teams like Nerd Rage, and you've got K-Piz being with the Royals lineup for close to, I think, 2.5 years, is something like an image that he kind of tweeted out after the fact. You've got Fazan, who's played on CEX, also Royals, Emin, Royals, CEX, and Hype being a player that had a stint with, or played with Playing Ducks, and
Lithuania was in one. Yeah. Lithuania and MDO as well.
Yeah, Lithuania ended up getting, that was, I think Playing Ducks were picked up as a full Lithuania team eventually. And then when they all formed Fierce Esports, that's a lot of, they had expectations for sure. And despite the fact that it was a 2-0, the score lines were relatively close altogether. I think it was 12 or above 10 rounds each, every map played for both sides. So it was like 16-10, 16-12, I think the final was.
Yes. Yeah, it's 16-10 on the first map, which I believe it was Cash, the first map, I want to say. I believe that was Ferrari Peakers map pick. Was a relatively good showing by Fierce. Obviously, Ferrari Peakers hadn't dropped a map the entire tournament. Definitely could have been a map Fierce won. But I'll talk about Overpass, which at one point looked firmly in the favour of Fierce, but they just made a couple mistakes that a team at their level really shouldn't be making. Not clearing their angles properly, not clearing anything properly at some points. I mean, on Overpasses around, I think it was a 3 versus 5, and they know that Ferrari Peakers have taken B short, but they do not clear under the sign as they come out the door. They lose their round from there, and the game just sort of falls out of their hands. And I think that just got to them a little bit. I think they had high expectations, like you said, coming into this event. I think that was fair to have. They've had a really good record in main. I think it is 8-1 last time I checked, which is certainly good. Most UK teams really will make it to main, but won't get much further than that. I have a good chance of making it to advanced if they can keep this streak going. But again, Ferrari Peakers were just the better team at the end of the day. They had the better aim. They punished the mistakes of Fierce Esports, which is unfortunate because I really wanted Fierce to do well this tournament, and they certainly did, getting it to the final. But I think they personally had the expectation to probably win this. Obviously, I don't know them personally, and I'm not inside their head. But going into the tournament, the way they were playing, certainly should have been high hopes for them.
Yeah, and because of the fact that the UK scene is kind of incestuous almost. We cycle players in and out of rosters almost constantly. It was kind of nice to see Capers, Fazan, and Emin players at 4 in previous lineups like CEX, and then when they had played in Royals prior as well, it was great that they kind of had that trio coming in. They ultimately, because I think Royals and Bulldog ended up qualifying or being in the finals for Omen, they actually did some kind of weird merger between with Swaggy and I think Totung and them to get themselves into an Omen spot where that is how this team kind of came to fruition as well. They made the best out of every possible roster move and everything that they qualified for. So there was a lot of thought coming into the roster, I feel like, but ultimately you come fifth to 8th in Insomnia, you play second at Epic.Lan, things didn't seem to stay together.
Yeah, and that will be our next topic going into the roster changes. Obviously, Epic.Lan, something that was refreshing about this Epic.Lan was that there was no sort of surreal mix where you have your Cryptics, you have your Mighty Maxes, and then you have your Smooya mix where you get your Sliggy or whoever. So it really was up in the air. It was a fantastic event to be at. It was really fun meeting some great people. Obviously, the likes of Yumi, met some of the Baron's Money Crew players as well. Just had a relatively good time. That's what Epic 25 is there for. I mean, it's to have a good time. You get that LAN experience that allows you to possibly get on a better team, which is, I mean, a lot of teams, especially in the UK, do look for that LAN experience because it's relatively easy, really, to attend an Epic or an Insomnia for that matter. Epic is pretty cheap, really. You can pay for your ticket and just stay there. Obviously, you've got to transport your PC, and now they're offering PC rentals. So the future of Epic.Lan is bright as well. We will move on to the next topic. That is roster changes. Obviously, why don't we just start off with this? Capers had not had his contract removed, and he is no longer part of the Fierce organization or the team. What are your thoughts on that, Yumi?
Well, he's having to give up his roster on ESEA, which, like I said, I kind of mentioned earlier, 2.5 years on the same roster is a lot longer than, let's say, most players will stay on one roster at any given point. He was kind of the heart of this team. He was, I think, the person that approached Fierce initially with the offer and everything, but it seems like things have kind of fallen through. He's the rest of the team seems to be moving on without him, and they actually took part in the minor qualifier and did significantly better than anybody saw coming. There were loads of players that were upset with how they'd gone out to the likes of Fierce. They beat teams like AGO and Pride, and they ended up, I think, losing to Valiance in the round of 16 of that qualifier, that is a significant level of team that they are beating, granted in a best of 1 and online, right? So there are other factors at play, but immediately with a player like Totung that I think Swaggy has played on a team with before, and Bulldog is it's kind of good to it's good to see that the roster change hasn't impacted them incredibly negatively. Granted, they could just be in that sort of honeymoon period almost. So it does remain to be seen after getting a result like that, whether they can kind of keep that up and raise the bar as far as where they place at certain events.
Yeah, and the big question really is, do they pick up Totung now off that performance in the minor? I thought I had seen someone tweet about it, but I feel like I think someone either deleted it or I was just seeing things. But it wouldn't be certainly a bad pickup. He's had experience playing with some of the players, like you said, Swaggy in Bulldog. Could make sense, however, they may have a better option on the table. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see the future of Fierce really looking good, especially off that minor. Me and you both praised them on Twitter. Beating Ago in a best of 1, I think it was 16-9. That's not exactly a close scoreline. It's not a stomp by any means, but even if that's a best of 3, you're still taking a map off a team like Ago, who were the highest seed, I believe, in the qualifier, if I'm correct. I think they were. And then going on to beat Pride, another good Polish team, and they had a very graceful exit against Valiance as well. They put them onto Nuke, which is always going to be a tough map against the likes of Valiance, and they managed to get the scoreline to 16-10, which is certainly good. Valiance obviously showing a lot of LAN experience, a lot of experience within that roster. JW's brother is on there. Nico's brother is on there. And some of the some good players for sure. Fierce certainly need to be very happy with that performance in the minor. It's unfortunate they weren't able to get any further, but what can you really do? Round of 16, you go up against Valiant. They gave it their all and they performed really well. I'm very happy to see what they can do going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they ended up placing, I think, better than Endpoint in that particular course, but also we always have to sort of put the asterisk next to everything, is that online best of ones,
Yeah,
it is hard to kind of get the best of the best in terms of the teams and the quality when you have formats like that. It is the best of 3 does negate some of the online aspects of Counter-Strike, but it doesn't fully negate it.
yeah, I mean, absolutely right. We do have to always put asterisks on these types of performance. You know, could it just be momentum? After beating Aggo, maybe momentum pushed them forward against Pride. I think it was a 16-14 win, so certainly close. However, again, even if it's just sort of a one-off thing, there's stuff to work on from that. You know you have the capabilities, and that gives you more confidence. It may just be the honeymoon phase. Obviously, not quite sure who they are going to confirm for that roster. I'm sure there's plenty of picks they can go for in the scene at the moment. A few people LFT. However, we will move on to the next roster change, and that is Revelation Gaming. Now, this is something I didn't personally see coming. Revelation Gaming adding Russ and Impact after removing JCMX and Casa.
Yes.
We should have that coming up as well. Obviously, Hawk tweeted on Twitter that JCMX and Casa were unable to commit time to the roster, which is why they were ultimately removed. But I think this is a real positive picking up Russ and Impact, both very capable players. Russ is someone who can pick up the AWP as well. I had a look at their stats in main just before they left as well, doing decently well, sort of around the 80 to 100 ADR mark. This is a good pickup. What is your opinion, though?
I'm conflicted about the way that all of that has gone. Really, it kind of leads into. Granted, they need to pick up 2 players because they seem to want to remove JCMX and Casa. Casa, a very mechanically skilled player that, if you looked at some of their games in Revelation, you do kind of question where he was placed, I think. But mechanics and all that aside, it fully disbanded, or it changed the course of Buzzkill's lineup as well, right? Because they've poached 2 players out. They need to fill those players in for the side of Buzzkill. And it was interesting to see Russ being a part of that move, just because of the fact that he or at least was the in-game leader at a point for Buzzkill. And so maybe the thought process is that Hawk can then bounce ideas off another IGL, or maybe they can have specializations on certain maps. There are possibilities there based off that, but I don't know. I wasn't really sure about how things would go for them coming into the new Revelation thing, because they would need to change their structure up significantly based on the fact that Russ is a fairly aggressive IGL in terms of how he wants to get information for his team. So he'll pick up the AWP quite often, or at least on Buzzkill he did, and he'll go for these aggressive peaks, which can lose them rounds quite a lot of times, or at least it seemed to lose them rounds at Epic 25. And Impact is a very reserved, kind of willing to play the support role for the team. So I do rate the Impact pickup, but Russ was a bit of an unknown coming into the roster for sure.
Yeah, I think probably, obviously, again, just a guess, a theory really at best, that maybe Russ really just wanted to relinquish that IGL role. Maybe he didn't want to continue on with it. He's not a dedicated IGL in terms of, that's not a starting role. He wants to be that rifler, or certainly a main AWPer, both capable on the rifle and the AWP. Hawk, decent IGL in my books. I think he's very good on the up-and-coming IGLs for sure as well. Something that UK scene needs. Obviously, adding to the roster Russ and Impact, they then combine with Hawk. Leaf, one of the best young talents we have, other than the likes of Cypher, maybe even Fluffs, obviously Tadpole when he was more active in the scene. But I think that's a very capable roster. Again, a couple asterisks over it. Will it work is the big one, obviously, for any roster change, in terms of they've got to switch up what they want to do. Russ has got to relinquish that IGL role. or maybe Hawk has got to relinquish a bit of his power over the team in terms of what he's got to do, what he's got an IGL for. Could bring in specializations, like you said, for certain maps. That's all to be seen. Obviously, though, 10-3, I believe, currently in main, so certainly a good scoreline, certainly to work off, close to being able to secure players. I think you need possibly, it's either 10 or 11 wins. So, starting all right. I think they lost their first game, but have won ever since. But what we will touch on now is obviously what happened to Buzzkill. Another person we didn't actually mention is Ryder, who decided to step back from the roster after Epic.Lan, after obviously the poor result, and that left MT and Mog.
Yeah, and then I think MT and Mog ended up being kind of merging with the Lifts lineup a little bit. They tried to see if they could get it to work. Hoy and Emmy ended up joining the roster as well. Then they brought in Hype, a different Hype than the Fierce
Swedish one.
A Swedish Hype. Hype, a very popular name, it seems. But they kind of trialed things out. The hopes were, I think, that they would be able to either kind of save Buzzkill's roster in terms of what they had in the Omen League, and whether they're able to maintain the London Lynx roster and things as well. I think there were plans for that. But ultimately that fell through as fast as it was conceived. So they practiced a few times. I think they were interested in getting like a decent strap book of maps and setting up procedures on different maps. They have the ability to do so. So they definitely have these strap books available and the options to do so, but it just didn't seem like they were able to work together, it seems, or at least from what I've heard from some of these players, is that they weren't able to get things to work with one another.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I've heard as well. That's fair enough. Really, you can't do much about that. If you don't click as players, you don't necessarily get along due to personalities. I'm not sure it was quite down to that. It was just, there was no click. Sometimes when you get into a roster where you have teammates around you, you click something, you feel something in there that you're like, oh, okay, this team can work. But it seems like they just didn't get that. And that is unfortunate because they're all very capable players, a very skilled lineup. It'll be interesting to see what all these players can do moving forward. I hope they all land up on teams soon because they are all so good. It'd be a shame to let their talent go to waste and not have them play for a season or something like that. But just want to touch on quickly, obviously we did mention the London Lynx roster earlier. Obviously Emmy, Hoy and stuff were playing with them, I believe. But I believe they tried to reform. Now, this is what I was told by Danny, was that they were trying to reform the roster under Fraser, Casa, Danny, and JCMX. However, Fraser and JCMX have now left that roster. JCMX, I think, is on a mix in Open currently, and Fraser's currently on XZenX, advanced roster. So not quite sure what happened there. Again, a roster that could have done something. I wasn't quite sure about their fifth as well. But it's unfortunate that they weren't able to get together. Danny is someone I've personally played with, personally coached, and he's so good. I enjoy playing with him. He's got a right mentality to get himself far in this game. It'll be interesting to see where those players end up. This is sort of I think most roster changes this sort of level of the scene we've had after any Epic or Insomnia, or at least since I've been around anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely strange to see. Epic.Lan, not usually kind of held as the most prestigious, more community event for the UK. Insomnia kind of held the belt as far as being the go-to UK LAN. I think in a lot of ways it still is. But there is if you do have these caliber of players, you do expect to place very well. And so you fall through at certain points or don't progress as far as you'd like, then obviously your stake in the tournament kind of influences your ability to work together with the roster in the future, because you don't think it will work out or you don't get the results that you're expected to. And we kind of, I think during our casts of Epic 25, we saw Fraser go up against CEX in, they ended up, I do think they ended up playing against each other, and that was kind of a romantic thing. But I think they ended up mixing London Lynx for a few games, trying to
Yeah.
cycle for that 5th player, and then they just ended up not finding that. And like you said, they've ended up on different rosters. I think JCMX is currently sitting in my ESCA Open roster.
Oh, that's right. In fact, I did check earlier, and I thought, is that Yumi on that roster?
Yeah, he's
clearly like, you're more capable than most players
we've
that you can see.
poached all of the old Meds lineup from Epic.24, so it's unlucky for the rest of the UK scene, it seems.
You really hate to see it. Yumi he's just a poacher, starting his own organisation and just getting all the good players under his contract. But like you said, CX did actually knock out Lifts in the lower bracket. But that was something me and you personally were romanticising while we were casting. Like, this is a matchup we really want to see. Frazier, I think is a very good AWPer. There's no question about it. He can certainly fit into most lineups as an AWPer. I'm really excited for him to see what roster he can go to. Obviously not quite sure of that yet. I'm not sure. I don't think he knows where he's going yet, obviously, as well, but we'll have to wait and see. Again, we move on to our next roster, which is U4XGG. Ghosty and Treyux removed, and 2 London Lynx, or former London Lynx players added, Brody and Trials. That is obviously the Emperor team that is in EPS and Intermediate. Don't know too much about Ghosty and Treyux, to be honest. However, Brody and Trials, 2 very capable players, 2 very good aimers as well.
Yeah, and I think Brody played with Emperor before on My Insanity, which is, I imagine, part of what influenced the decision. He's played with him before. He kind of knows how he's going to play. Brody being a free agent coming from London Lynx after his stint with My Insanity, it kind of makes sense in terms of like I kind of touched on before, the UK scene is very incestuous. We do recycle the same players, and it's very easy to pick up a player that you know, and you know what you're going to get into, than somebody that is a complete oddball or just inexperienced. You don't know too much about them.
Yep. Okay. Well, we have just one more roster now. This roster doesn't have something directly really to do with Epic 25, but the events that took place to some of the players do. Now, this is obviously about the Diabolus situation. Me and you were both at Epic when this went down. You mean there's a couple Twit-longers that were released, both presenting their sides, basically. Astra and that was saying wasn't a clean house. They weren't provided what they were saying. And this is something we were talking about just before the stream started. There's not enough sort of org support in terms of CS, at least from these UK orgs, the likes of Method, XL, obviously left their rosters. Endpoint, really the only one. Wind and Rain, obviously, this now Stiffmeister roster was the core of. But a bit of a tricky situation, really.
Yeah, Wind and Rain were kind of the shining hope for a long time, at least the start of this year.
Yeah.
And then when that kind of fell through, the team wasn't sure where they were going to go. They ended up splitting into different rosters. I don't know if even some of those players are still active. And Diabolus was another kind of beacon of hope. As soon as that kind of came through, they were getting a team house. They were going to get a list of things that didn't seem to be met from the players. Granted, on the other side of things, the org didn't seem too happy with how the players, one, responded to issues in the house, and 2, whether the issues were even caused by the org, and more so the responsibilities of the players not being fulfilled in terms of just general house management and household thing. It's a 2-sided argument, right? So we don't really know all the facts, but we've been presented 2 sides, and it's unfortunate that kind of falls through, and the lack of infrastructure for these kind of mid to up and coming teams, or teams that can potentially do something within the international circuit, is it definitely hurts in terms of building up the talent and making sure that we have something to sort of rally behind, because we have to live vicariously through players like Def and Smooya and Surreal.
It's exactly right. We really want to see more of this infrastructure built up from some of these orgs. Obviously, at the end of the day, these organizations are businesses, and if they don't view these rosters to make them money or to be good enough for their caliber of roster, that's fair enough. But it really would be great to see some more orgs. Obviously, Fierce, a good one. They haven't really discussed in terms of the org coming in. They provide a lot for their players. I think they're doing a good job as an organization as well. Had a little bit of dealing with them, just having a nice talk with them. I was supposed to do some show match between Fierce and CX. Seem like very nice people as well over there, and I'm glad to see an org like Fierce getting involved. I believe they have a battalion team as well, possibly. That's
Oh,
nonetheless.
yeah.
Anyway, we will talk about the new Stiffmeister roster being formed: Astro, Link, Eccles, Stanley, and Dom. What are your opinions on that roster, Yumi?
Oh, that's a roster that could do a significant portion of damage. I think that they definitely have the talent there. Stanley obviously doing to NA, and his we talk about the lack of infrastructure. That whole scenario with him going overseas didn't seem to be handled the best, and that's what ultimately led to him coming back to the UK. I imagine. Eccles, he took part in Gamers, ended up on Fnatic Academy. Another player that I kind of missed when I was highlighting players we kind of live vicariously through. Eccles is another player that people kind of rally behind because pretty humble beginnings, making it through that kind of game show contest, and Fnatic Academy ended up getting dropped. So it's a good list of free agents that they've been able to pull together, and obviously Link and Astro don't need as much introduction, just based on the fact that we did kind of touch on that kind of wind and rain roster that did ultimately fall through, and Diabolus being reformed through them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, this roster is certainly something to look forward to. Eccles, believe only 18. Such a good talent. He has had such a good time in that Fnatic Academy roster. It's a shame, really, that they disbanded as a team. Obviously, they were dropped by the Fnatic organization. But they were doing good in advanced. I think there was some sort of dispute within the team. Not quite sure. Don't really want to go into something that I'm not sure at all what the reason for it. But after they lost 2 games, I believe it was Eccles which is disbanded. But this is a good roster. Obviously, the addition of Dom, just coming off his Epic.25 win, he showed that he was capable of playing at that level. Obviously, has shown before. I believe my first Epic.Lan, he was in the final that I casted. Or was it? It might be the low bracket final. But this is certainly something to look forward to. Obviously, they are currently looking for an organization right now, and I hope a good organization picks them up. They definitely deserve it. Definitely players that are capable of getting to that MDL level. Obviously, Astro and Link have played at that level. Eccles advanced. Not massive differences between advanced and MDL. Still quite sort of a skill gap, but certainly a team that can play in there. However, that brings us to a close here, Yumi, and that is first episode done. And wow, that was a lot to talk about, really.
I didn't even think we'd get it as long as this, to be honest. I thought we'd just like speed through everything, but we were able to. It seemed like we were able to talk about some stuff. Hopefully, it wasn't as much us rambling as at least touching on points that people wanted to at least hear about. But I do think, do we not have kind of one overarching topic in that there's kind of a what do you have any personal opinions as to what the scene kind of lacks? I mean, we kind of touched on maybe org support. We kind of talked about how rosters move a lot, but is there anything kind of outside of that, or maybe even you can expand on some of those things?
Yeah, I think one thing, if you look in depth at rosters, it's IGLs playing in out. I think that is a big problem within the scene. You see a lot of the top rosters right now lack a clearly defined in-game leader. Your Shikis, your B Magics, your Emperors. That's about it, really, at the sort of top level of the scene. Not quite sure what level B Magic is. I think he's playing intermediate with Devious, possibly. I think that's sort of the level.
I think Rezu and Trouble and are also in-game leaders, but they stick very closely to their rosters, right? So
yeah, exactly. But what, especially the lower half to mid-level with the scene lacks, is that IGL depth. If you get to the top of the levels, you can probably scrape a few out. Definitely get some good ones. Obviously, we've mentioned some of them already. A lot of these players are willing to take up the IGL role as well, which is really something that a lot of scenes wouldn't like to do, which rosters just wouldn't form. But a lot of players like to take a hit if it's their individual performance. They just take a little bit of a hit. I'll take up the role. Someone's got to do it. Let's just get this done. But again, tactical depth for me is a big problem in the scene. We've got enough talent, I think. We've got AWPers, an abundance of good AWPers at the top of the scene, good riflers, a decent amount of young talent coming up now as well. It's got to be that sort of veterans really trying to get these young talents up to the place they could be, and also just IGLs in general.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with you. There definitely needs to be I think more. I think as we've talked about it before off stream, is that the UK scene doesn't really have that kind of like father figure coming into the scene. Like, he doesn't have somebody that can nurture and grow these young talents. And I think some of the issues with having an established IGL is that often IGLs don't get enough respect.
Yeah.
It's very hard for teams to function fully when you don't back all the decisions made by your IGL, and that often comes with garnering enough experience. And how do you get experience that's at least uh, respectable amongst the rest of the scene? It has to be high enough LAN placements, and you need to get players together that will get you to that point as well. So unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a support structure, and I think UK circuit does help in that. But
Yeah.
Even those veteran players don't seem to be, although they do offer criticism, it is often in the tone or in
It's
yeah.
sort of an aggressive tone that a lot of players come off as sort of, you're just being a bit toxic. And that, again, I think is something that I didn't actually touch on, is a lot of players are unwilling to take criticism, especially from if you're sort of trying to be the IGL, and you take a criticism like, could you call like this? A lot of people will get offended. A lot of players don't like to change their style. It is, I think it comes down to, at the end of the day, is, you touched a little bit on veterans, so did I, is maturity in a lot of these players. Really, sometimes don't want to give up what they want to do in terms of their style, not necessarily giving up a different role. And a lot of these teams are, the first instinct for when something goes wrong in their rosters is just get rid of someone. Let's not work for it. Let's just cut to the chase. Let's just cut this guy.
Yeah, that's part of the roster cycling, right? Like, players coming in and out of the same roster constantly. It'd be like, oh, we'll remove you for a season, see how we go. Then they realize, like, oh, I actually miss some of the aspects of this guy's play. We'll bring it back into the roster. And then suddenly there's another conflict. And then suddenly you've had 5 different players in the span of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, where you're just constantly trying out new things, expecting something to eventually stick. And I do know the old proverb: you throw enough things at the wall, and eventually one of them will stick. But
Yeah.
it's a terrible way to kind of approach growth as a team, or growth as a core within rosters. And ultimately, if you're not able to stick with something long enough, then it ultimately probably won't work out.
And it's exactly right. You can't keep cycling out players. What is that doing? Every time you remove a player, basically you're sort of stunting your growth. You're slowing yourself down, because that player needs to be showed what you're doing as a team, what you like to play. You need to make sure that they fit into the style as a team as well. And I think that's a perfect way to close out this episode as well. We've touched on a lot of topics here. Obviously, Epic.25 being the main focus, but in general, talking about some of the players in the scene. Hopefully, a lot of players will go out now and think, maybe I'll try and become an IGL, or maybe they won't.
Yeah, I don't know how much influence we have on that.
Yeah, not obviously the biggest influence in the scene, but I'm hoping a lot of players do see this and think, maybe my maturity is a problem in the team, or maybe we shouldn't make a roster change as our first issue. However, thank you all for joining us there. It's a first for me and Yumi for sure, and I'm sure there was a few problems without. I'm sure some things some people disagree with, certainly, but again, our opinions. And this is the first time we're doing this, and I'm super excited to keep this going. And I'm glad to have Yumi on board with me. I just want to give a quick shout out to our producer, Fraser, obviously trying to work through this. This is the first time he's done this with us as well. So it's going to be a few kinks. But the main focus really is to thank everyone for the support they've showed us on Twitter. Some of the big names really in the scene reaching out, messaging. We do really appreciate that. And it's rewarding to have this just idea come into your head and then think, I've just met this bloke at Epic.Lan. I think he's the perfect one to do this with. That was literally just that's in depth as much as I really think. And then sort of over the couple of weeks that we were talking about this, then we started to flesh out the idea a little bit.
Yeah, and it's great that we got that reception so well. And I think a lot of us being able to do this more in the future will actually come down to whether people are willing to give feedback about certain things. Like, please do reach out about any topics that you thought we didn't do justice to, or regardless, or any issues that you did face. Obviously, we know some of these already, even just doing it on the fly. That's the problem with doing live podcasts, is that things can go astray. But we'll flesh those things out eventually, hopefully. And hopefully, I like, even just from us talking, I realized we ranted about certain things for a little bit too long. You tried to keep us on track, but I took over in some bits where I just constantly talked about something. But please do reach out.
Yeah.
The outcry of support has been fantastic so far, and we hope to keep doing this.
Yeah, exactly. And if you do want to reach us specifically, obviously my Twitter is at Roy Rogue. Yumi, yours is?
Yumi with a 3, and then
Yes, and Frozen Fraser is our producer. At Map Control CS is the Twitter. Please do message us if you want us to talk about anything. If you have any ideas, even if you want to appear, we're certainly opening to getting some of the veterans, some of the best players in the scene on here to give interviews, to get their opinions on the problems of the scene. Obviously, we want to do a couple episodes where we just talk ourselves, see how we're doing. But again, thank you everyone for all the support that we've been shown so far. It's really overwhelming. However, we will close it out there. Thank you all once again for the 5th or 6th time, and hopefully we'll see you next time.